Freedom to me means freedom from anything that's holding you bondage, emotional freedom, physical freedom, whatever it is that feels like it's just kind of keeping you down in one way or another. Cut those cords, heal those things. That is like the ultimate freedom.
Welcome to the Your Business Untethered podcast, a space for freedom seekers ready to build and scale a business that supports their wildest dreams, even while traveling the world. Hi, I'm Dina, creator of Way of the Founder and your host. I imagine this podcast as a space where aspiring and established freedom entrepreneurs come to forge a path towards purpose, financial freedom, meaningful impact, and location independence. I'll be your guide as we defy the norm, heal old conditioning, and step into the leaders we were born to be. I myself am a firstborn, a daughter of divorcee, sister, girlfriend, professional coach, nomad, and expat of a decade plus, as well as yoga aficionado and energy healer. In my previous career, however, I worked a 9-to-5 as a professional fundraiser for American orchestras. Can you believe it? However, I needed more. I needed more freedom in my life. So 5 years ago, I called quits on resume success and claimed back the reins over my own life. What started with a one-way ticket to Vietnam and a single backpack filled to the brim has since grown into Way of the Founder, where I've helped hundreds of clients defy and steal from the path they were told to follow, redefine freedom, fulfillment, and success on their own terms, and build impact-driven businesses that let them live and work from anywhere. Join me each week for deep dives into leadership, strategy, and mindset, as well as the feeling that fuel the untethered CEO. That's you. Whether you're building your dream with a coconut flight ticket, wine glass, or coffee in hand, you are in the right place. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome back to another episode here of the podcast, Your Business Untethered. I'm so excited to have Jessica with us today, who helps entrepreneurs find freedom from bondage that our stories keep us in and learn how to use that experience for our own good and gain, not just in life, in our business. This might be more commonly known as she helps us create our brand story so that we can make more sales. But Jessica has just such a beautiful way of looking at our brand, our copy, our writing from the perspective of, is this really you? Does this really represent who you are and what it is that you want to bring into the world? And she has this just clear belief that your story matters. It magnetizes. And the more you create you, the more you can create an audience that's truly aligned. And for everyone who's listening every week, that this is coming on the heels of the last episode I did with a guest, where we talked about actually finding out what your story is and writing it down via non-creative fiction. So if you haven't listened to that episode, or if you have, these two episodes are just, they just go together so well, as we talked about the personal side of creating your story last week or 2 weeks ago. And today we get to talk about how to weave your personal story into your brand story, into your business. Yeah, to make more money, but also to do more good in the world through your business. So, Jessica, welcome to the podcast. Please take it away. Who are you and what do you bring into the world?
Thank you for that lovely introduction. I already made note. I was going to go back and listen to that whenever there's a off day. It was very lovely. So thank you.
No, you're welcome.
Yeah, so I'm Jessica. I have been living abroad. I'm originally from the US, living abroad since 2011. I'm currently living in Liechtenstein, teeny country near Switzerland. I started my business about 3.5 years ago, and it came off the heels of a 10-year career as an international school teacher. A short story of that is I had been teaching for about 3 years when I realized this was not the end-all thing that I wanted to be doing, which was very disappointing to me because I really was seeking some kind of career that felt really purposeful and meaningful and generous. And I really thought teaching was going to tick those boxes. And all those things could be true for some people, but for me, it just didn't feel fulfilling the way that I had envisioned it to feel. So after the third year, I was like, this isn't going to be it long term, but I don't know what else is. And I wasn't ready to just leap into something unknown yet. And so I continued to teach a total of 10 years until it was like a twofold thing. It was the pandemic that kind of gave me that window of opportunity to jump and do something different. But also, it just felt like that was the time. I had gone through a few big life events that kind of prepared me for this is the next chapter. I'm going to close this and start something new. And so, not completely knowing what I was going to do, I took the leap into copywriting because I was always good at writing and I loved writing for other people. I thought helping them make their businesses better and sell whatever it is that they were trying to sell was going to make me feel fulfilling. And then when I was doing that, that's when I discovered helping them sell things is great, but getting to the real heart behind the business and understanding why they do what they do and what the real core message is that they're trying to put out into the world, that was where my interest really was. And so I just started narrowing down on what is your brand story? How can you tie all of those crazy, seemingly unrelated experiences from your life into what you're doing now? So that's where we're at now. That's what I've been doing.
Lots of things in there, right? Like I heard I became an expat. I left my home country. I moved to a different country and then I changed my careers and then I became an entrepreneur. And then inside that business, I pivoted. And I really want listeners to hear that this is such a common story, right? Sometimes in looking at social media, we might be led to believe that entrepreneurship and specifically success in business is just one straight line from idea to execution to success. And it's just really not, And the more we allow ourselves to really embrace not just who we are, but who we are becoming, the more aligned what it is that we bring through business or a job into the world will be. So Jessica, I wonder if you'd be willing to share a little bit more about like that moment in time when you realized that you may stop being an employee and start being an entrepreneur. What were the thoughts, the fears, the beliefs, the dreams that came up during that moment for you?
So there were a lot of things going on at that time. Because of the pandemic, I had a lot of time by myself, and that was not normal, especially as a teacher. Usually you're in the classroom, you're covered with children all day long, and it's like the weekends were my only time to just kind of breathe. But this was different. It was working from home. You had a lot of space. And so I did what I have always done, which is pick up a journal and just start free writing. There's something about pen to paper that is magical because it usually can pull out things from within that you don't even really realize are there. So I started journaling and I started making kind of these lists of like, what is it that brings me joy? What are the things that would make me feel like I'm fulfilled? Because that was something I always desired, is like this sense of fulfillment. Well, what is that? Like, it's a pretty word, but what does that mean? Because it means something different to me than it might mean to somebody else. So I started like brainstorming all of this stuff. And now looking back, I would say I was getting down to like, what are my core values? At the time, I didn't have that language around it, but now I do. So getting to those core values and then starting to listen to people who have done it. I think it's really important it's kind of like that see to believe. You need to know that someone else has done what it is that you're about to do, because then it's like, okay, if they did it, then I can do it. Like there's a chance. So there were a few podcasters that I really leaned into that helped me see like, it is possible to start something. I don't come from a family of entrepreneurs. I wasn't raised around people who were kind of scrappy that way. It was more the opposite, actually. Like, go to school, get your degree, get your job, work up the ladder. And none of that ever sounded good to me ever. But owning a business also, I just never kind of considered that to be a possibility for me. And so this was all fresh and new, but seeing that somebody else did it and just believing that, it's time for me to take the risk on myself and just test it out, because what's the worst thing that could happen? And that's something that I still practice a lot today. Is like, my therapist taught me that years ago, but it's like the worst case scenario exercise. What is the absolute worst thing? And work your way back. Because if you kind of get all of that idea and like the fears and the what if out of you, then it's like, okay, even if those things happen, you probably have a potential plan to deal with it if it were to happen. And you can give yourself a little bit of a cushion to take that leap. So those were the things that I put into place to like make that decision.
That last bit, I resonate with that so deeply. I was in France at a workshop with one of my first coaches, and she posed the question to me, what will you do if you fail? And it was sort of like the reverse of what's the worst case scenario, right? Like, let's just go ahead and prepare for failure so that if I fail, that's just taken care of. Now, outrageous little me was like, what do you mean failure? Success is totally fucking inevitable. So, that's a story for another day and another episode, right? Like, sometimes I believe as entrepreneurs, we have to be a little audacious with our goals, with our dreams. And sometimes it takes an audacious statement like, of course, this is going to work. Right? And you offered some amazing snippets in there, right? Like, sort of preparing for failure is a beautiful exercise, but also seeking out support. And some of the support can be very, one-to-one or very direct. And other support can be, you just have to be able to see it, to believe it. So I'm going to start listening to specific podcasts very intentionally. Right. So I love that. I wonder if you were to be able to go back in time and had a little chit chat with your younger self, what's a piece of advice that you would give her, specifically that younger version who was about to leap into entrepreneurship?
Oh my gosh. I think one of the things that I would tell her is like, believing in yourself is not just something that you say. Like, it's really an action, and it's such an intent, like a daily intention that you have to set. I think that probably about 2 years into my starting my business, I had this epiphany where I was like, I have to stop waiting for permission for things, or I have to stop waiting for someone to come and like rescue me or give me that opportunity. I have to create these things myself. And in the creation, you really have to believe that those things are possible. So just because I was listening to those podcasts and those women were saying like, yes, it is possible. It was possible. Like, it worked for me. It'll work for you. Those are all just words until I really start believing it myself. I think it took me too long to get to that place of like really believing it. And that's something that I still struggle with. I mean, there's off days that we still have. And it really is about like, what are your core wounds, and like really getting into the work that you need to do on that stuff. Because what I do know now that maybe the first person, like my younger version, did not know, is that entrepreneurship like brings up all of those interpersonal little demons that you have that you thought before. Because when you work a job, you can show up to work and just be like, okay, I'm going to leave my own stuff at the door. I come in, I do a job, and I leave. And then you deal with your stuff after. Entrepreneurship, there's no more separation. Yes, there is in a way of like, I'm going to show up to this client call, and of course, I'm not going to like bring my stuff that I'm going through to the call. But when you're by yourself, making your own decisions, having to trust your decisions, having to strategize things, having to be creative, all of these responsibilities are on you to make this work. if you're struggling, like whatever is the struggle underneath, it's going to impact the business too. And I never knew how much. I mean, I heard the word mindset when I was first starting my business, but that meant nothing to me. And then I realized what they meant by the word mindset. And I was like, so you mean like the actual healing part of like, and all of those blocks and all of the conditioning that I'm bringing in with me to this business when there's so much that I have to shed and work on in order for this to be sustainable and be successful and for me to kind of rise up to be that entrepreneur that like I envision myself to be. So those were huge lessons.
There is a new mindset you have to create when you become an entrepreneur. And I think the internet just doesn't have the guts to call it what it is. And that is, you have to begin to unbelieve all of the shit that society and your families told you in order to morph you into this person that suits society at large. And you have to unbelieve that. You have to unbecome that conditioned self and become who you were meant to be. And that's a really long process. And that's a process that doesn't necessarily have to take place in a vacuum. Like, you don't have to first complete the process and then step into entrepreneurship. Actually, I found that stepping into entrepreneurship and healing in tandem has just such a beautiful effect, because you get to look at, this client just triggered me. Let's go to someone, be it a coach or a therapist or a masterclass, and look at that. Why is it that this client is triggering me? Because that client, it's not their fault, right? The source of that trigger is much younger, and that is much older in your life, right? So I love that you bring this up, right? I have a whole class that is called Unbecoming. Right? You have to unbecome, you have to undo all of the shit, the childhood baggage. You have to take a moment to sort of open up that proverbial suitcase and look at, what are the beliefs that I was taught about success, about money, about working hard? And are these beliefs serving me in my business? Right? And I just adore that you would be willing to share that piece of advice with your younger self, and that you share it with the world here. And I'm sure that this piece of advice also is reflected in your brand story. So I'd love, maybe let's start here. Like, I really want to understand, what is a brand story? But perhaps you can sort of exemplify also, what is your brand story and why does it matter?
I love that. So a brand story is who you were, what happened, and who you are now. But the who you are now piece is the part that like needs more finessing, because it's highlighting the transformation that you have gone through. When we look back on our lives and we see like, what are the lessons we've learned along the way through all of those challenges, through the aha moments that we've encountered? Those are all little transformations that we've had. Who we were 10 years ago, 20 years ago is not who we are today, hopefully, and it shouldn't be. We're always evolving. And so when you get the framework and you really highlight how you have evolved into who you are today, that makes such a powerful connective story. And it connects you because you're sharing something that you have endured, that you have gone through, and it encourages someone else to take action. And I think that's where sometimes we look at a brand story and we think, oh, it's just like the chronological events of like, I used to work here and now I do this, and here I am, I started my business. But like, that's not encouraging anybody to take an action. It's not making them feel connected to you in any way, unless maybe you worked together and you have that like, oh yeah, she used to work there, I worked there too. That's weird. But that's not an emotional connection. It's more of a surface level. So when I first started this work, I really didn't realize that. I thought a brand story was kind of that chronological, like my brand story was. I used to be a former international school teacher. I really loved to write. I became a copywriter. Okay, well, that's not very powerful and it's not connecting me to my audience and it's not helping them connect to me as a person. The other thing that you have to remember is you are wanting to build that emotional connection because people are coming to work with you. The transformation that you offer in the end product and the deliverable that you have is probably wonderful, but it's probably not super, super, super distinct compared to somebody else who is also a coach or also a brand strategist or also a VA. The thing that's going to draw someone to work with you is something about your energy, your experiences, the emotions and kind of that emotional intelligence that you bring to the work that you do. And so the brand story is going to be like a snippet of that. And it really is, it's just a snippet. A lot of people put a little too much pressure, I think, sometimes on the brand story. Like it needs to convey everything, like all of my essence. That's not possible because we're not writing your novel. If we were writing your novel, then we could like bring out that whole essence of who you are. But in a brand story, which is likely going to be very shortened to an introduction to who you are, how are you making that very powerful? And really, it's more about like intrigue and curiosity. If you're going to share something about your life, what are you leaving the audience with to make them say, ooh, I want to know more about that. I want to know more about her. I want to know more about like why she's doing what she's doing. So those are the things that I think make a powerful brand story that are often overlooked.
So people, I guess I'm talking a lot about the internet in general today. We'll just go with it. The internet tells us that we have to show up authentically. And I think in 2025, we're a little over that, right? Because what the frick does being authentic even mean? However, there is, of course, a bit of truth to it as well, right? We want to show up in a way that feels good for us, that feels aligned, that feels easeful for us, and that truthfully represents who we are and what we can do for our clients. So what part does authenticity play in our brand story? How do I create a brand story that truly represents who I was, what happened, and who I am or am becoming?
I think authenticity is like the huge piece of this, but I do think that that word is being overused right now where it's losing a lot of its meaning. But I appreciate what you said about like, you want to have that story that feels easy and natural to share. And that's the authentic piece. If I'm coming in with a story that I feel like I'm fumbling over my words, it feels a little too scripted, it feels like I'm not really sharing all of the parts that I want to share, then I would define that as being inauthentic because you're covering something up. I've worked with some clients that when we're working on their brand story, they will say to me, yeah, I have this part of my brand story that I really want to share because it really showcases why I started doing what I'm doing. I started coaching because my child has some sort of disability, and it led me to become an expert in knowing how to care for a child with this type of disability. But my family doesn't want me to share that because it would be shameful for family. That is also cultural. I understand that there's like a lot of cultural nuance when it comes to what's considered oversharing and what's not. And in those cases, I feel for the person because I can tell that the person who wants to share it, that is her authentic story, because it really is like, I wouldn't have even gotten into this profession had it not been for this thing that happened. And then there's the friction side of why she feels like she can't share it. And in those situations, I feel like that's something that she will either probably have to just make the choice if it's something that she wants to just say, you know what, this is my business, my life, I want to share this story. Or if there's a way of, I always call it like a reframe, like, can you reframe that narrative in a way where everybody still feels comfortable with the information that's being shared, but the message is still the powerful part of it. So I think that, and I'm sorry, I think I got a little off topic. Can you remind me? No, it's good. Okay.
It's all good. You were on topic, and then you just expounded on it in a really beautiful way, right? You kind of dove right into how do you create a brand story, and that actually would have been my next question, right? As you said in the beginning, like a brand story is not meant to be an autobiography. Right? It's not like, oh, I was born in Germany in this year, and then this, and then that, and then the US, and now this, right? It's meant to, I mean, what comes to mind is a highlight reel, but I feel like you're going to be mad at me for calling a brand story a highlight reel. But let's call it a transformational story. What, like, if I were to sit down and I didn't have your support, where would I begin to look for the elements that I need to craft my brand story?
I actually love that you said highlight reel, because some of the morbid ways that I think about it is like, I think of like your funeral, like what is the thing that's going to play? And I know that is terrible. But when I think about a story, and I know brand story is like a very specific type of story, but I would think about it in this way and then switch it to the brand. Your story, like everybody is going to have a story that they leave as a legacy. It is your legacy of what happened in your life, the decisions that you made, how you impacted people. That's the same thing in your business. So I would start with like, what is my life story? Don't think of just your business. Like, I'm here to help people write their story. What am I really here for? Like, why do I care so much about helping people write their story? I care a lot about it because of what I just said. I think this really is your legacy. I think that when we are not being honest with ourselves about what our real story is, we are like we're choosing to put a veil over our head and not face a lot of the truth. And knowing your truth and really tapping into that, that's the authentic piece, but it also like helps other people. Like you and I were talking before we started recording, and I was sharing with you something that I'm like kind of struggling with, and you said, but the demons that we struggle with, those create the best pieces of content because someone needs to hear that. Yes. And it's the same thing with what we're doing. So, and I learned this because years ago, I was in therapy, and I grew up in a home of a lot of like addiction and some codependency stuff. And so my therapist had recommended I start going to 12-step meetings. I started going to Al-Anon. In those meetings, I saw people sharing stories that, first of all, I had never really heard truth telling like that before, and people being very vulnerable about what was going on behind closed doors that you normally wouldn't hear. But the more that I went and the more that I could reflect on what was actually being shared and why it was so impactful was not just like the open vulnerability of it, but it was like the evolution of the story. Like you're coming into these rooms feeling really wounded, really hurt. You're processing what is going on. You're in that state of like, you reached the end of yourself with something, and now you're really putting it all out on the table and like healing. Okay, so that story that you came in with is going to be one version. When that person has now healed that story and comes in to share their life experience and the journey from going from that hurt, wounded, raw place to now being this transformed, healed person who then can go back and offer inspiration and hope to that person who is also now in that space of like, oh, this sucks. My life just fell apart. It's so powerful. And I was like, that's the evolution of the story, that like we all have that because we've all gone through something. We've all learned a lesson. And now it's time to like share that with other people. So when it comes to your business, like I would really get into what are your values? Like, really, what is it that you really value? Why do you value it? And then what is your mission for what you're doing? And then start piecing the puzzle together of like all the experiences that you've lived that kind of brought you to believe what it is that you're doing now. Why do you believe that your mission is so important? And you're like, I'm leaving this job to start this business because I believe so much that what I'm doing is going to make an impact. It's going to change people's lives, whatever it is. That's the story. But it takes a minute to get there.
It almost sounds like you're giving people permission to own their mistake.
Yes, 100%. Because, like, if we were all perfect, oh my gosh, how boring.
Mhm.
How
But we're
boring.
trying to be perfect, right? Like, I see this all the time with clients who are new to online marketing. It's like, oh, this has to be perfect. Clients who are teaching or coaching, it's like, I can't teach or coach on this until I haven't perfectly healed from that. And I say it all the time. Hey, it's okay to not teach and talk about the thing that you're like literally still bleeding out and the wound is still pussing. But it's okay to teach from the wound that like has just about covered up with the first new layer of skin. It's okay to teach from the scar. You do not have to be perfect. You said how boring would that be, but also how unrelatable would that be? I don't want to be working with someone whose life and ability and perfectionism I can never attain. I'd much rather work with someone who says, crap, shit, I forgot about that. So talk a little bit more about like the power of our mistakes and our imperfections.
Well, you nailed it. It is so relatable because anyone that you think of, like if you look at your Instagram feed and like the people who pop up because you love following them and you feel inspired by them, chances are they are not presenting themselves as being perfect. They have probably shared a part of their journey that you felt very drawn to and you felt like you related to it. And I think that, I mean, that's the thing that we're moving into, right? Like we're moving into this age of AI and what is AI and what's not AI. And I'm seeing so many images right now on social media and like immediately I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so pretty. And then you immediately after saying that's so pretty, you realize like it's so fake. And well, that's where we are right now. So like if you want to be standing out and you want to be coming across as being a human, which we should be because that's what's going to create a sustainable business in the end of the day, then you have to get rid of that perfectionism. And I know this because when I first started my business, I like perfectionism is my coping mechanism. I guard myself up with that. So as long as it looks a certain way and it sounds a certain way, then I feel safe with it. And that's like my perfectionism. And so I was creating a lot of content. It wasn't getting engagement. It wasn't like moving anybody to take action. And what I realized is like I had started my business like with a lot of imposter syndrome because I'm coming from a completely different career and moving into a different one. And I was coming with like a lot of those wounds that I hadn't worked out yet. And some of those wounds being I had just gone through a divorce a couple years prior to that. And there was like a lot of shame with the situation. And something about it was like gnawing at me. And one day I was like, I'm just going to get on my stories on Instagram and like share a little bit about this divorce and like my journey here and how ultimately the divorce was kind of the thing that put the fire under me to make this decision. It wasn't an immediate decision, but it got something shifted. That was when I decided this 10-year chapter is now closing. And so I went on my stories and I shared about it. Engagement blew up. People were like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that. I'm so, blah, blah, blah. Did that story have anything directly to do with my business? Kind of. I mean, I was sharing a little bit of like how that situation fueled me to start this thing, but it didn't have anything to do with like my ability to write copy for you. But it was something that people related to. It was something that they felt seen by me sharing that. And that's what people want. They want to feel seen. They want to feel understood. And so if you're sharing a story that like is offering that and you're saying, hey, me too, me too, me too, it's going to connect with people. That is going to be the thing that makes them want to work with you over the other person that they're not finding that me too relatability with.
Mhm. So I wonder if we can, as we're beginning to wrap up, just talk about probably the question that's on everybody's mind is great. Now I have the brand story. What the frick do I do with that? Like, where do I insert it into my content? And just to sort of prime this, something that's been a really fun and empowering journey for me in my content is that the moment I stopped looking at competitors and what they're posting and what's working for them and trying to replicate and started just speaking from the heart, still in the format that Instagram likes, right? But just speaking from the heart, things began to happen. So now I have the brand story. It's all beautifully written. How does it help me in my content? Where can I, on a day-to-day basis, insert that brand story into my business, into my marketing?
One of the biggest things that I think helps most of my clients and myself with this process is like you get your brand story and do kind of the exercise that I said, and you're going to have a whole novel of stuff, right? So you have your main brand story that you can be sharing over and over again. The way that I would share that would be introduction. So you're at a networking event. How are you infusing that story into introducing who you are? But then more than that, I mean, of course, you can do like reintroduction posts. You can have it part of your bios. Those are like the kind of surface level. This is how you can infuse it. But the next step would be like all of that stuff that you wrote out, that you hopefully journaled. Now in that, you have all these little micro stories. So like, how can you use all those other stories in a way that's going to talk about your values? I really value connection. Why do I value connection? What are some experiences that I have had in my life that like lend to, oh, this is a demonstration of what connection means to me. This is why it's so valuable to me. You can start to use those things to create social media posts. You can use those things to highlight what your mission is, what your approach is to working with a client. Your story is going to come in at every angle for whatever piece of content that you're creating, for whatever, if you're showing up on podcasts, you need to have stories that you're pulling out of your pocket. Yes, you are telling the same story. Do you know how many times I've shared this story of like 12-step program and my life, international teaching and divorce? Everybody's heard it. If you know me, you've heard it, but it's a story that keeps repeating because it is my story. It had the biggest impact on me. And it's what led me ultimately to what I'm doing today. So, like, don't feel like because you shared it once, everybody's already bored of it. Don't share it again. Share it. Share it over and over and over. Sound like a broken record, because ultimately, you don't know who came across your content at what point. They have not heard your story as many times as you have told your story. And then also be creative. Like, there's other ways of sharing your story. Not every reintroduction post that I have on social media is exactly like the one before it. You can get playful with what part of your story you feel like sharing today, what angle you want to come from, whatever. And yeah, and I think the biggest piece of advice is just start practicing sharing this stuff with somebody that you trust, that is not going, like, they create a safe space for you to share this stuff, because it's going to be really hard if you have not vocalized what you do, why you do it, what your story is for it. And then all of a sudden you're at a networking event and you're going to tell a bunch of strangers that you've never met before. Like, you need to practice. So find someone that you trust to practice sharing this stuff with, because that's what's going to make it feel like you're going to step into that and it'll feel more natural.
I love that so much. Like being able or having permission to strive to let your content feel natural, I think is unfortunately such a novel and refreshing and relieving thing to hear, right? It's like, oh my gosh, like I don't have to fabricate something. I don't have to create something that has me turned into a sellout, right? I don't want to be the broy marketer out there. I want to connect with people and I want people to buy from me that I haven't had to coerce into buying, but that I've just, connected with, and therefore they buy from me. Now, of course, the important piece to this is you still have to make sure that you convey who you work with and what you help them do, right? But at the end of the day, like you said earlier on, right? Like your offer is probably not that unique. But who you are and how you speak and how you show up and how you're able to connect with another human soul to soul, that is unique.
Amen.
Jessica, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for sharing, not just your wisdom about copywriting and telling your brand story, but something that I really appreciate about you is how deep you're willing to go. Right? You're someone who's truly striving to master the correlation or the connection even between our inner world and our business world. And they are connected and we get to celebrate that connection. We get to celebrate the fact that they're not two separate entities and you're just a beautiful embodiment of that truth, really. So I love you. I see you. You're beautiful. What you're bringing to the world is gorgeous. And I want to know, I ask almost all of my clients too, but all of my guests this is, what does freedom mean to you?
I love that question. Freedom to me means freedom from anything that's holding you bondage, emotional freedom, physical freedom, whatever it is that feels like it's just kind of keeping you down in one way or another. Cut those cords, heal those things. That is like the ultimate freedom.
And how can we find you? How can people work with you?
Thank you. You can find me. I'm on Instagram all the time, jessicagraham.brandstudio. You can also visit my website, jessicagrahambrandstudio.com. And there you can hit the community tab up at the top. I have a free monthly meetup for women in business to come together and share their stories. It's called Your Stories in Action. We do a lot of journaling prompts, share our experiences, and that's a safe space to come and practice those stories, like I said. So I'd love to have you.
And I just want to really tell people how amazing it is to be able to be in the same space. Jessica, she's such a safe harbor, such an amazing person to just be able to spill it, right? Just to spill the beans, and she will hold space for you. She will not judge you. And yes, as a copywriter, she will also help you turn that pain, turn that mistake, turn that lesson into something that's fuel for your business. So strongly recommend that you check her out. Thank you so much for being a guest today. Dear listeners, as always, create more freedom today than you did yesterday. And I will see you and hear from you next week. Take good care. I love you. I mean it. Thank you for listening to the podcast, Your Business Untethered, hosted by me, Dina, creator of Way of the Founder. I love hearing from you, so please drop me a DM on Instagram sharing your insights from this episode. And if you are ready to take the leap, my free guides, Plot Your 9-to-5 Escape in 7 days, and the Freedom Business Scorecard are in the show notes for you to grab. If this episode created change for you, please leave a review and be a friend and share this with a friend or colleague that you love. Until next time, please wake every day, seize the day, defy the norm, and create your very own type of freedom. I love you. I do mean it.